The first shot across the bow the morning sky over Earth's largest cities was still. People walked to work, children played in the parks, and birds flew through the sky without a care in the world. Life continued as usual, peaceful and unaware. But above the atmosphere, things were about to change. Earth's defense satellites, designed to keep the planet safe from distant threats, had picked up an anomaly. It wasn't much at first, just a faint blip on the radar, something too small to be of any concern. But as the hours passed, the blip grew larger and more distinct. It was moving fast. At the Global Defense Command Center, Sarah Cole, the lead communications officer, sat at her station, her eyes glued to the screen. She could feel the weight of the growing uncertainty in the pit of her stomach. Something was off. She quickly ran a set of scans, trying to make sense of the data. "Sir, we've got something," she said, her voice steady but betraying her unease. General Ethan Reed, the commander of Earth's military forces, turned from his position at the center of the room. "What do we have, Cole?" His voice was calm, but his mind was already preparing for the worst. "A fleet," Sarah said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "It's alien, it's ... big, and it's heading straight for us." For a moment there was silence. The room was filled with the soft hum of machines, but the air felt thick with the weight of the news. General Reed's heart raced, but his face remained unreadable. "How long until they reach us?" 2 hours, maybe less," Sarah replied, her face pale. "They've got the speed and the firepower to reach Earth before we can mount a proper defense. If they want to take us down, they'll do it without breaking a sweat." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Officers moved quickly, shouting commands, sending messages to other defense units. Reed knew this could be Earth's most dangerous hour. He had seen alien threats before, small skirmishes, mostly, but nothing on this scale. This was different. "Activate the global alert," Reed ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I want every defense system on standby. Get our forces ready." His orders were followed immediately. Earth's defenses were vast, but still young, an evolving network, designed to protect the planet from asteroids, satellites, and smaller attacks. But this was something else. The enemy ships, whatever they were massive, larger than any known spacefaring vessels Earth had ever encountered. Within minutes, the first shot across the bow was fired. From the vastness of space, the enemy fleet launched a single, brilliant beam of energy that slammed into one of Earth's outer defense satellites. The satellite, once a symbol of humanity's greatest technological achievements, was obliterated in a flash, leaving nothing behind but a cloud of glowing debris. The attack was sudden, precise, and devastating. General Reed watched in silence as the explosion lit up the night sky above Earth. The message was clear. They had no intention of negotiating. This was not a simple reconnaissance mission. The enemy had come for one purpose: to claim Earth. "Alert every government," Reed said, his voice cold. "Tell them what's happening. We're not dealing with a simple invasion force. We're dealing with something far more powerful." Sarah turned to him, her eyes wide. "What do we do, General?" Reed's eyes flicked over the map, watching the incoming fleet as it drew closer. "We prepare for the worst. Our fleet is already mobilizing, but it's not enough. We need to send a message. If we're going to survive this, we need to show them that we're not just going to lie down and die." The days that followed were filled with tension. Earth's leaders came together in a unified front, making decisions that would determine humanity's future. They knew they couldn't match the alien fleet's size or firepower. But they had something else, something that had always been a part of humanity's survival: the will to fight. General Reed was at the center of it all. He stood in front of Earth's remaining military forces, his eyes scanning the room. "The enemy doesn't know who we are," he said, his voice firm and steady. "They think they can just waltz into our backyard and take what they want. They think they can scare us into submission. Well, let me tell you something, they're wrong." His words resonated through the crowd. Humanity had been pushed to the edge before, but this was different. Earth wasn't just going to give up. Not now, not ever. "We'll fight them with everything we have," Red continued, "and we'll let them know this is our home, this is our galaxy. If they think they can break us, they're in for a surprise." The final countdown had begun. The alien fleet was getting closer, and Earth's last line of defense was nearly ready. Their most powerful warship, the Defender, had been reconfigured with new weaponry and shields that had never been tested in battle. Its crew was ready, though they knew they faced overwhelming odds. In the depths of the command center, the final message to the galaxy was being prepared. Earth's leaders had agreed on one thing: they would not kneel before these invaders. They would not beg for mercy. They would send a final message, directly to the alien fleet. As the signal was sent out, it crackled across the stars, broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of humanity's resolve. You chose this conflict. Now face the consequences. The universe was about to hear from Earth, and what they would hear was not the sound of surrender. It was the sound of defiance. The stage was set. The Defender moved into position, prepared to face the alien fleet head-on. The fate of Earth and humanity's place in the galaxy hung in the balance. The gods of the galaxy had arrived, but Earth wasn't going to let them win without a fight. The time for diplomacy was over. Now it was time for war. The final message, the message had been sent. Humanity had declared its intent, and now there was no turning back. Across the globe, Earth's leaders and military commanders braced themselves for the inevitable. The alien fleet had heard their challenge, and there was no doubt they would respond in kind. General Reed stood at the command center, his mind racing. The Defender was now in position, its engines humming with raw power, its weapons locked and loaded. The crew of the Defender, humanity's last hope, was ready. But as the clock ticked down to the inevitable battle, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. "They're not responding, Sarah. The communications officer said quietly as she looked at the screens. "No communication, no retaliation. They're just sitting there." Reed's eyes narrowed. "They're waiting. They want to see what we'll do next." He paused, reflecting on the alien fleet's silence. The message they had sent was bold, but it was not a declaration of blind aggression. It was a challenge, an invitation to fight. The Alithians had always seen themselves as gods of the galaxy, untouchable and beyond reproach. But humanity had shaken that illusion. "They'll come for us, General. And when they do, we need to be ready," Marco, the ship's pilot, said as he checked the battle readiness of the ship. Reed turned to face him, his eyes full of resolve. "We're not just going to survive. We're going to show them who we are." Humanity has always been underestimated. They think we're weak because we're small, but they don't know what we're capable of when pushed to the edge. As the hours passed, the countdown to confrontation continued. The Defender sat in the orbit of the moon, close enough to Earth's atmosphere that they could feel the pull of their home planet. In the silence of space, everything felt small, insignificant. Yet, in that moment, it was clear that Earth wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its place in the cosmos. We're not going to wait for them to come to us, General Reed said, turning to the crew. We'll make the first move. If we show them that we're willing to take the fight to them, we might just have a chance. The crew prepared for the assault. The ship's weapons glowed to life, and the engines roared with power. The tension was palpable. For most of the crew, this was their first true battle, the first time they would face an enemy that outclassed them in nearly every way. But they had one thing the Alethians didn't: determination. We've got one shot at this, Reed said. We hit them hard and fast, disrupt their formations, create chaos. We take out their biggest ships and cripple their fleet. Then we do what they never expected us to do. We take control. The Defender darted from Earth's orbit, its weapons firing in rapid succession as it moved toward the alien fleet. The Alethians had yet to make a move, but it was clear that their silence was not one of surrender, it was one of patience, of calculating their next move. Ethan's pulse quickened as they closed the distance. The enemy ships, massive and imposing, filled the viewscreen. They were beautiful in their design, sleek, alien, and otherworldly, but to Ethan, they were nothing more than targets. Fire everything we've got, Reed ordered. The Defender's weapons tore through space, energy blasts lighting up the void as they hit their targets with precise accuracy. The first few shots hit the shields of the nearest Alethian cruiser, but the power of the ship's energy field absorbed most of the blast. We're not doing enough damage, Sarah said, her voice tight. Their shields are holding. Ethan didn't hesitate. Then we go for the core. Aim for the energy conduits. They have to have a weak point. The Defenders, weapons adjusted, now targeting the energy conduits that powered the Alethian ships. With every shot, the crew of the Defender could see the damage they were causing. Alien ships shuddered, their shields flickering before they collapsed entirely. For the first time, the gods were feeling the sting of human ingenuity. The first Alethian ship exploded in a brilliant flash, and the shockwave sent ripples through the other ships. The fleet was losing its cohesion. The alien fleet, once so confident in its overwhelming power, was now in disarray. We've got them on the ropes, Marco yelled, watching as the Alethians scrambled to adjust their tactics. They're breaking apart, Reed nodded. We keep pushing. They think they control this battle. Let's show them who's really in charge. But the gods were not so easily defeated. As the Defender continued its assault, the remaining Alethian ships regrouped. The fleet had underestimated the humans, but now they were focused and furious. The Defender was now surrounded, and the alien fleet was closing in. They're preparing to counterattack, Sarah warned. They've got more firepower than we anticipated. They won't back down. Reed's mind raced. The fight was far from over. The odds had shifted, but they had made their point. The gods were no longer the untouchable rulers of the galaxy. They had been challenged, and now they would have to fight for their place. All hands, brace for impact. Marco shouted, his hands flying over the controls. They're firing. The Defender shook as alien blasts rocked its hull. Sparks flew from the control panel, and alarms blared. The ship was taking heavy damage. But Ethan, ever the leader, stayed calm. We've shown them we're a threat. Now let's finish it. The gods strike back. The battle was far from over. The dust of the initial skirmish hadn't even begun to settle when the Elysian fleet regrouped. The Defender had made a significant impact, crippling several of their ships, but the gods were not ones to be underestimated. They weren't going to let a small human warship embarrass them. They had been challenged, and they would respond with everything they had. Ethan stood at the helm of the Defender, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding around him. The once formed fleet of the Elysians had scattered, but now they were reforming. Their ships, sleek and powerful, were realigning, their weapons charging for another assault. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice tight with urgency, "they're coming in fast. They've restructured their fleet. They're not attacking in a standard formation anymore. They're spreading out, trying to overwhelm us with numbers." Ethan's mind raced. The gods had adapted quickly. They knew they couldn't outgun the Defender, but they had another advantage: numbers. The sheer size of their fleet and their advanced technology were more than enough to overpower humanity's defenses. This wasn't just about firepower, it was about endurance, tactics, and waiting for the right moment to strike. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Marco," Ethan ordered. "Don't give them a clear target. We'll keep them on their toes, but we need to find an opening." Marco's fingers gripped the controls, his face focused as he steered the Defender through the chaos. The ship weaved in and out of fire, dodging energy blasts from the advancing Elysian ships. But it wasn't enough to avoid the inevitable. The gods were relentless, and soon the Defender found itself caught in the crossfire of multiple alien ships, each of them firing with deadly precision. "We can't keep dodging forever, Captain," Marco shouted. "There are too many." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. "I know, we need to break their formation, disrupt their control. We've got to find their weak spot, something that can make the difference." Meanwhile, the Elysians were regaining their composure, reorganizing their forces to surround the Defender. Their ships were no longer firing in a single, concentrated strike. They were surrounding the human warship, like predators closing in on prey, and in the center of the chaos, their largest ship, a monstrous behemoth, hovered like a dark shadow, its weapons ready to unleash a devastating blow. "Captain, that ship is their command center," Sarah said, her eyes fixed on the ship's energy signature. "If we don't take that down, they'll overwhelm us. They're using it to coordinate their attacks. If we disrupt their command ship, we'll break their cohesion." Ethan's gaze hardened. This was the moment. If they didn't act now, the gods would crush them under their sheer force. The Defender could keep evading, but it couldn't survive. A prolonged assault. They needed to take out the command ship, and fast. "Target their command center, full power," Ethan commanded. "We need to hit it with everything we have." The Defender sped forward, its weapons charging for the final assault. The crew braced for what was coming. The enemy ships fired in waves, their blasts shaking the Defender to its core. It was a brutal battle, one that had already cost them more than they could afford. The human ship dodged and weaved, avoiding the full force of the alien fleet, but every shot took its toll. "Shields at 40%, Captain," Marco shouted, his voice strained with the pressure. "We can't take another direct hit like that." Ethan knew they had to act quickly. This was their last chance. If they didn't break through, they would be overrun. The crew's only hope was to hit the heart of the alien fleet. The command ship, with a final push, Ethan ordered Marco to take the ship head-on, straight for the largest Elysian vessel. The Defender rocketed forward, its weapons unleashing a furious barrage of energy blasts. The crew could see the command ship's shields flicker as they impacted, but they weren't enough to stop the oncoming assault. "We're almost there," Sarah said, watching the energy signature of the command ship pulse with increasing intensity. One more shot. We need to hit the core. Ethan clenched his fists. Do it now. The final shot was fired with precision. The energy blast hit the command ship directly at its weak point, an exposed area where the ship's shields were vulnerable. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwaves sent ripples through the surrounding fleet, causing ships to stagger and lose their formation. The once mighty flagship of the Elythians was no more. The battle around the Defender was chaotic. But as the massive alien ship disintegrated, the entire Elythian fleet seemed to lose its rhythm. Ships began to move erratically, their coordination faltering without the command ship to guide them. The gods' confidence had shattered, and for the first time, the humans had gained a significant advantage. "We did it," Sarah whispered, in awe, watching the chaos unfold before them. Their command ship is gone. They're falling apart. But Ethan wasn't celebrating. He knew this victory was only the beginning. The gods were still powerful, still dangerous. They wouldn't give up so easily. "Hold your positions," Ethan ordered. "This isn't over. The gods won't surrender. Just because we've destroyed one ship." The crew took a deep breath, knowing that the battle was far from over. But for the first time in the conflict, they could see a glimmer of hope. The gods had been challenged, and their once control was crumbling. Asterisk. The gods' last gambit, the destruction of the Elythian command ship, had sent shockwaves through the remaining fleet. The gods, for the first time in millennia, had been forced to retreat and regroup. Their empire, once untouchable and feared across the galaxy, now showed cracks. The crew of the Defender could see it. The tide of war had shifted, but only slightly. The gods were not ones to accept defeat. They would respond with everything they had left. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice still filled with disbelief, "their fleet is scattering. But I'm reading something. Another ship much larger. It's coming from the dark side of the system. This is bigger than anything we've seen so far." Ethan's eyes darkened. "How big?" "Massive," she replied, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. "It's more than just a warship. This is ... an orbital fortress. It's bigger than anything we've ever encountered, and it's powering up its weapons." The words hung heavy in the air, each one weighing more than the last. The gods were regrouping, and they weren't just bringing in another fleet. They were deploying their final weapon. "The Defender can't take that on alone," Marco said, his voice sharp with urgency. "We need reinforcements. If that thing fires, it could wipe us out in seconds." Ethan turned to face his crew. His mind raced, but there was only one answer. "We don't have reinforcements, Marco. We make our own reinforcements. We'll use what we have, and we'll finish this." The orbital fortress loomed on their sensors now, a colossal structure that seemed to stretch the very fabric of space. Its surface was dark, sleek, and covered in metallic plates that shimmered with ominous energy. The gods were not just throwing another ship into the fray, they were throwing their last, most powerful weapon. "We have no time," Ethan said, his voice low but filled with determination. "Get us in range of their central energy core. If we destroy that, the whole fortress will collapse." Marco nodded, hands steady on the controls. "Right, but, Captain, if we go in, we're going to be up against everything they've got. We'll be sitting ducks if we don't time this perfectly." Ethan's gaze hardened. "Then we make sure we're not the ones who are targeted first." The Defender hurtled through space, its weapons charging and shields raised, ready for the ultimate challenge. The alien fortress loomed larger and larger in their view. The final test had arrived, and there was no turning back now. The crew had fought tooth and nail to get to this point, but this would be the defining moment. As they approached the fortress, the ship's weapons began to charge. Massive energy beams began to gather at the tip of the fortress's enormous cannon. The countdown to death had begun. The defenders' shields flickered under the intense heat of the beams. Every second felt like an eternity. All hands, brace for impact. Marco shouted, his hands gripped tight around the controls. We're almost there. Just as the fortress prepared to fire, the defender performed a daring maneuver, dodging the incoming blast by mere inches. The entire ship rocked under the pressure, but it held steady. The Alethian fortress's cannon fired, but it missed, striking the empty space behind them instead. "This is it," Sarah yelled, her voice rising above the chaos. "We've got the opening. Take the shot, now." Ethan didn't hesitate. Fire. The defender unleashed its full arsenal, concentrated firepower aimed directly at the heart of the alien fortress. The massive beams of energy slammed into the surface of the fortress, penetrating its outer shields and driving deep into the structure. The fortress groaned under the pressure, its hull bending and warping as the defenders' firepower tore into it. For a moment, the ship seemed to flicker as if it was on the brink of collapsing. But then, an even more terrifying sound filled the air, a low, rumbling hum that grew louder and louder. The fortress's central core had activated, and it was pulling in massive amounts of energy, preparing to retaliate. "Brace for impact," Marco shouted again, his voice filled with panic. The defender shuddered under the intensity of the energy waves that shot out from the fortress. The energy from the core was immense, and the ship's shields flickered under the strain. They couldn't keep up. "We won't survive another blast like that," Sarah screamed, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to finish this, now." Ethan's mind raced. He had one shot. The defender's hull was beginning to buckle under the pressure, and the weapons were about to go offline. If they didn't act fast, it would be the end for humanity. "Marco," Ethan said, his voice steady, "take us down, right to the heart of that fortress. We'll destroy it from the inside." Marco hesitated for a fraction of a second, then slammed the controls forward, propelling the defender directly into the heart of the fortress. As they dove, beams of energy shot out from the fortress's defenses, barely missing them. It was a race against time. "We're in," Marco shouted, his voice triumphant. "I'm taking us straight for the core." The interior of the fortress was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, its walls alive with alien energy. The defender landed on a massive platform near the core, and the crew disembarked, their hearts pounding with the weight of what they were about to do. "Sarah, you're with me. Marco, keep the ship ready to go." "We may need to make a quick exit," Ethan said, his voice firm. They rushed through the labyrinth, following the vibrations of the fortress's core. The walls around them pulsed with light, each step taking them closer to their goal. The alien fortress was on the verge of collapsing, its systems failing, its core unstable. The final door opened before them, revealing the heart of the fortress, a massive, glowing energy core. It was the source of the fortress's power, and it was barely holding itself together. The crew could see the flashing lights of warning signals as the energy began to build to catastrophic levels. Ethan's eyes hardened. "This is it. We finish this now." The heart of the beast The energy core of the Elysian fortress pulsed in front of them, a violent glowing orb that was the source of unimaginable power. Its light flickered as the fortress's systems began to break down around them. The ship's hull had barely held together after the massive energy blast, and now they were standing in the very heart of the beast. The air was thick with the crackling hum of power, and every step they took seemed to reverberate through the fortress. "Time's running out, General," Sarah said, her voice strained as she scanned the control panel before them. "If we don't disable the core in the next few minutes, the energy buildup will trigger a chain reaction. The entire fortress will go critical and we'll be in the middle of it." Ethan's pulse quickened, his eyes narrowing at the glowing orb. The stakes had never been higher. The galaxy depended on them, but even more pressing was the knowledge that humanity had stepped into the lion's den and had the chance to kill the beast once and for all. The gods had thought their power was unchallenged, but they were wrong. "Then we make sure it ends here," Ethan said, his voice steely. "We don't give them another chance to regroup. Sarah, can you override the core's control systems?" "I can." "Try," she replied, her fingers flying over the console. "The Elysians used a complex encryption, but it's not indestructible. I might be able to sever their control over the core, but I need time." Ethan glanced over his shoulder at Marco, who was monitoring their escape route from the control room. "Marco, make sure the defender is ready to move. The moment this core goes critical, we need to leave at full speed. We won't have a second to spare." "Understood," Marco said, his voice tight with focus. "I'll have the ship on standby." "You've got 5 minutes, General." The sound of crackling energy filled the chamber as Sarah worked tirelessly to crack the Elysian encryption. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and every passing moment was a countdown to destruction. The glowing orb in front of them seemed to pulse in time with Sarah's frantic movements, each beat a reminder of the danger they were in. "They're closing in," Sarah muttered. "If I can just..." Before she could finish, a deep, thunderous sound filled the room. The walls shook as if the entire fortress were alive. The lights flickered, and the system alarms blared, warning of an impending overload. "We don't have much time," Ethan said, gripping the rail beside him. "We have to move now." Just as Ethan turned to check the escape route, the air in the room seemed to change. The energy in the core shifted. The fortress had sensed their tampering, and it was retaliating. Suddenly, the floor beneath them began to tremble, and the sound of machinery came to life with a roar of power. "General, it's initiating a self-destruct sequence," Sarah shouted, her eyes wide with alarm. "The core is too unstable. It's going to blow if we don't stop it." Ethan's heart sank, but his resolve hardened. "Sarah, how long until you can disable it?" "Not long enough," Sarah replied, panic creeping into her voice. "The overload is happening faster than I anticipated. If we don't sever the cores connection from their central systems, the fortress will detonate before we can escape." Ethan clenched his fists. They were out of time. He glanced at the swirling energy field in the center of the chamber where the Elysian fortress's heart thumped with destructive power. "We're not giving up," he said. "Marco, get us to the defender's docking bay. We're leaving now." Marco's voice rang through the comms, sharp with tension. "Aye, sir. The docking bay's open, but you've got to move fast. You'll have seconds to get aboard before this place implodes." As the crew raced toward the defender's docking bay, the fortress seemed to come alive with a terrifying sense of urgency. The walls around them groaned as the system's final countdown began, each moment making their escape more perilous. The blast doors to the exits screeched open as they reached them, and the ship's magnetic field locked them into place, pulling them toward the safety of the Defender. "Captain, the core is," Sarah began, but her voice was lost to the deafening noise of the collapsing fortress. The corridors were shaking violently now, the lights flickering in chaotic flashes. The very foundation of the Alethian ship was giving way under the strain of the attack. Ethan grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward the Defender. "Keep going. We're not stopping until we're out of here." The last moments were a blur. The Defender's hatch slammed shut behind them, and Marco wasted no time in punching the throttle forward. The ship lurched, its engines roaring to life as it blasted off into the void. The crew watched in silence as the dark silhouette of the Alethian fortress loomed behind them, and then, as if time itself held its breath, the fortress exploded. A blinding light filled the viewscreen, and the force of the explosion sent the Defender spinning. The shockwave reached them just as they cleared the system, pushing them forward at breakneck speed. The force rattled the ship, but they were free. The fortress that had once represented the gods' absolute power was now nothing more than space. Debris, but as the crew caught their breath, they knew the war wasn't over. They had won this battle, but the Alethians would not let them go easily. The gods had been wounded, but they were not dead. Ethan looked at his crew, their faces reflecting both relief and the weight of the war ahead. "We've won this round, but the galaxy won't be the same. We've proven ourselves today, but there's more to come. We're not done fighting." The echo of defiance, the Defender drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space. Its hull scarred from the battle, its crew exhausted but alive. Outside the viewscreen, the remnants of the Alethian fortress glowed faintly, an expanding cloud of debris slowly fading into the darkness. The explosion had been massive, its shockwave powerful enough to tear through the heart of the enemy fleet. But despite the destruction, the galaxy remained unsettled, a storm of uncertainty brewing in its farthest reaches. General Sarah said, her voice breaking the heavy silence, "I'm picking up distress signals from multiple systems. The blast wasn't just a victory, it's causing chaos across the galaxy. The Alethian command fleet is ... scrambling. Their fleets are disorganized." Ethan leaned forward, his hands resting on the controls. "Good, they've been shaken, but that doesn't mean they're down. The gods will regroup. They always do. Do you think they'll retaliate?" Marco asked, his voice low with concern. He had been at the controls for hours, his focus unwavering, but even he couldn't escape the weight of the unknown. Ethan paused for a moment, reflecting on the immense task ahead. "They will. And when they do, they'll come at us harder than before. But that's their mistake. They don't know how far we're willing to go." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Are you saying we go after them?" Ethan's gaze hardened as he stood, turning toward the crew. "We can't wait for them to come to us. We have to take the fight to them strike when they're vulnerable, before they can rebuild. We've proven that they're not invincible, but we need to make sure they know who's in charge now." The Defender's engines hummed with renewed power as they set their course for the heart of Alethian space. The crew, though battle-weary, was resolute. The victory over the fortress had sparked a fire in them, a belief that humanity could fight back against the gods. But they also knew that they had awoken something far greater than they had anticipated. The gods, despite their arrogance, had underestimated humanity, and now they would seek to reclaim their shattered empire. "We'll need to move quickly," Sarah said, her fingers working rapidly across the console. "I've been tracking their fleet, and they're already trying to regroup. The blast from the fortress crippled them, but they're not completely destroyed. If we give them time, they'll rebuild. Ethan nodded. And we're not giving them. That time, Marco set a course for their capital. We're hitting them where it hurts. As the defenders sped through space, the crew could feel the intensity building. They had made it past the first wave, but they knew the next confrontation would be far more difficult. The Elythians had made their first move now. It was humanity's turn. The gods had always been the rulers of the galaxy, their power unchallenged, their fleets unbeatable. But the Defender had proved that they were not untouchable. Humanity had found its courage, its strength. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice tinged with worry, "I've been studying the readings from the Elythian communications. They're not just reorganizing, they're calling for reinforcements from across the galaxy. A massive fleet is on its way. They're getting serious." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be ready for them. Whatever reinforcements they bring, we'll face them head-on." Days passed, and the Defender continued its journey into Elythian space. The crew grew more determined with every passing hour, and the tension in the air was palpable. They had proven they could fight the gods, but now they had to take it to the next level. They were about to face an army that had crushed entire civilizations and empire that had ruled for millennia. And yet, here they were, humanity's last stand. "We're nearing their capital system," Marco called out, his voice steady despite the storm brewing outside. "I'm picking up massive energy readings. The Elythians are preparing for a final confrontation. They know we're coming. Then it's time to finish this," Ethan said, standing tall. "All hands, prepare for battle. This is where humanity shows the galaxy what we're made of." As they neared the heart of the Elythian Empire, the crew could see the immense scale of their enemies. Power. A fleet of colossal ships, each one larger and more imposing than anything the Defender had faced before, hung in orbit around their home planet. These were the true gods of the galaxy, the elite of the Elythian race. They had risen from the ashes of their failed attack and had brought with them their most devastating weapons. But the Defender wasn't intimidated. It had the element of surprise, and more importantly, it had humanity's strength behind it. As they approached the enemy fleet, a deep silence fell over the bridge. The final confrontation was about to begin. "General, the fleet is forming up," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. "They're readying their weapons. This is it." Ethan's eyes were hard, but his heart was steady. "We've fought too long and too hard to back down now. We've proven we're not just a species to be wiped out. This is where we make our mark." The Defender shot forward, breaking through the line of enemy ships. The battle that followed was unlike any the crew had experienced before. The Elythians, despite their overwhelming numbers, found themselves facing a force unlike anything they had ever encountered. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting to reshape the future of the galaxy. The Defender's weapons fired relentlessly, its energy beams cutting through the vastness of space, striking with pinpoint precision. Each shot hit its target, disabling enemy ships, tearing through shields, and sending shockwaves of destruction across the fleet. The gods were powerful, but they were no longer invincible. Ethan watched as the battle unfolded on the view screen, his face a mask of concentration. The Defender had done the impossible. It had brought the gods to their knees, and now humanity's fight for survival had become a fight for dominance. "One more push," Ethan muttered, watching the last of the Elythian ships break apart. "We finish this." As the final blows were struck, the Defender emerged victorious. The gods, despite their strength, had been broken by the will of humanity. The gods' empire was shattered, their reign of terror finally over. The shattered throne, the remnants of the Elythian fleet floated in space, a chaotic web of shattered ships and broken defenses. The final moments of the battle had left the gods' once mighty empire in ruins. But even in the wake of their devastating defeat, there was an unsettling silence. The stars outside the defenders' viewports seemed too quiet, as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Ethan stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the view screen. The damage had been catastrophic. The gods were no longer the dominant force they once were, but the defender had paid a heavy price for the victory. Their ship had been battered, its engines were strained, the weapons systems barely functional, and the crew, though victorious, was tired, their bodies and minds worn thin from the unrelenting pressure of the battle. "We've done it," Marco said, breaking the silence. His voice was a mix of relief and disbelief as he surveyed the damage to the defender. "We've broken them." Sarah, still working at her console, looked up. "For now," she said quietly, "but I'm not picking up any signals of surrender. They're retreating, ... But they're not done yet." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had expected this. The Elythians were not a race that would simply accept defeat. Their pride was too great, their thirst for power too strong. This victory may have shattered their throne, but the gods would not go down quietly. They would regroup, and they would be angrier than ever. "We can't afford to wait for them to rebuild," Ethan said, turning to face his crew. "We've shaken them, but we need to take this opportunity to strike. The gods may be broken, but their hunger for control remains." Marco nodded, eyes scanning the tactical readouts. "So, what's the plan, General?" Ethan looked out at the wreckage of the Elythian ships drifting in space. "We go to their heart, their homeworld. If we can take down their last bastion, their true capital, we end this. We show the galaxy that no one is beyond reach." As the defender made its way deeper into Elythian space, a sense of grim determination filled the crew. The last battle had been won, but the gods were not finished. The real challenge was ahead of them, a final strike that would either crush the Elythian Empire completely, ignite an even deadlier conflict. Sarah tapped rapidly at her console, her face furrowed in concentration. "We've got a lock on their planet," she reported, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "The capital city is well defended. There's a massive fleet still stationed above it, guarding the planet's last defenses. We'll have to get past them if we want to land." Ethan's fingers drummed on the control panel. "We don't need to land. We need to destroy their command structure and cut off their leadership. If we can hit the heart of their power, the rest will crumble. I'll take us in. Get us through their defenses, Sarah." She looked up from her console, meeting his gaze with a mix of apprehension and resolve. "Understood, but, General, there's something you should know. I've been tracking some unusual readings from the surface. There are movements in usual structures, hidden beneath the surface. The Elythians weren't just building fleets. They've been preparing something." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Preparing what? I'm not sure," Sarah replied. "But it's big, and it's buried deep." The Defender's engines roared as it entered the atmosphere of the Elythian homeworld. The sky above was dark, filled with swirling clouds of ionized particles. The planet below was a barren wasteland, ancient cities now reduced to rubble. The Elythians had built their empire on fear, but as the ship descended, it became clear that they had also built their last line of defense deep within the planet. "We're coming in fast, General," Marco said, eyes glued to the controls. "Hold on." The ship shuddered as the Defender broke through the atmosphere. The planet's defenses opened fire, energy blasts streaking toward them from every angle. But the Defender was agile, dodging and weaving as it made its way toward the heart of the Elythian stronghold. "Target the core, Sarah," Ethan commanded, his voice unwavering. "Take out everything that powers their system. This ends here." As they neared the capital, Ethan's mind raced. The fate of humanity and the galaxy depended on this strike. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, but he didn't falter. The gods had tried to erase humanity, but humanity had fought back, had proven itself not just capable of survival, but of triumph. The energy weapons fired, and the Defender's cannons erupted in a concentrated burst, striking the core of the Elythian fortress. The impact was immediate. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a deep rumbling filled the air as the core began to destabilize. "General," Sarah said, her voice urgent, "we've hit their command center. But there's a secondary power grid activating beneath us. It's massive. Whatever they've been hiding, it's coming online." Ethan's heart raced. He had expected retaliation, but this was something different. "Get us out of here," he ordered. Now. But it was too late. As they tried to pull away, the ground cracked open beneath the Defender. A massive, mechanical structure, far larger than anything they had encountered before, began to rise from the depths. The ground split, and the metallic titan of the Elythian slowly emerged, its colossal form towering over the battlefield. The structure was more than just a weapon, it was a symbol of the Elythians' last, desperate attempt to reclaim their lost glory. It was a massive, planet-shaking machine capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single strike. "No way we can outrun that," Marco said, his voice tight with disbelief. Ethan stared at the monstrous creation, his resolve hardening. "Then we face it head-on. We've come this far. We'll finish this, no matter what." The final confrontation had arrived. The fate of the galaxy and humanity's place in it would be determined by the outcome of this battle. The gods had given everything they had, and now humanity had to prove it could survive the storm and emerge victorious. As the massive machine towered above them, ready to fire, Ethan's voice rang out, filled with unwavering confidence. "Fire. Everything. This is humanity's final stand." The battle was far from over, but this time the gods wouldn't have the upper hand.